Some of the ones we spoke to, they reported being stripped naked, blindfolded, severely beaten by the Israeli captors, denied sufficient sleep, food and water. We had one account where the Palestinian said he asked for a drink and an Israeli soldier urinated in his mouth.
Some people think that the torture of the Palestinian prisoners started after the 7th of October and what happened on the 7th of October. But we know for a fact that the Israeli army used torture against the Palestinian prisoners way before that. And even when I was in Gaza 5 or 6 years ago, I met with people who were at the Israeli prisons before, and they told me that they have been brutally assaulted and tortured in Israeli prisons for many, many, many years, even going back to 40 years ago. And this has become like beyond any doubt that Israel is torturing Palestinian prisoners. So what does that even mean? Is the UK complicit in this? Is the UK receiving intelligence from Israel obtained through torture? So hello and welcome to Palestine Deep Dive. My name is Ahmed Al-Naouq, and today I'm very happy to be joined with my colleague Hamza Yusuf. Hamza Yusuf is a Palestinian British writer and journalist whose work focuses mainly on Palestine. Thank you very much for joining me, Hamza.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. So Hamza, you recently wrote a piece for Declassified with the title RAF Spy Flights Over Gaza Risk Complicity in Israeli Torture. So I would like to discuss it a little bit with you if you don't mind. So first, tell us about the testimonies that you have seen of the Palestinian doctors or Palestinians being tortured in Israeli prisons. Who are these Palestinians? How many Palestinian detainees are there? Can you also give us some examples of stories and details about what you have heard and what the Palestinians have endured in Israeli prisons?
Yeah, the accounts are really grim, and the torture and imprisonment of Palestinians has always been a central feature of Israel's oppression and rule over the Palestinians. But certainly, I think post October the 7th, there's been an acceleration and intensification of that. Some of the ones we spoke to, they reported being stripped naked, blindfolded, severely beaten by the Israeli captors, denied sufficient sleep, food and water. We had one account where the Palestinian said he asked for a drink and an Israeli soldier urinated in his mouth. Other instances of them having soldiers spit in their mouths as well. There were particular rooms. For example, one was we spoke to a Palestinian lawyer who alluded to a dog's room, which is basically where Israeli soldiers take you to the room, continuously beat you, and then let military dogs effectively release them on the Palestinian prisoners. There was examples of Palestinians being beaten and then Israeli soldiers asking other soldiers to join in. We spoke to a Palestinian lawyer who said, he was beaten savagely by one soldier and then another 4 joined in, and in the process they broke his arm. So this is inhumane, and the most savage and brutal treatment of Palestinians, which, as I said, it's long been a feature of Israel's rule. There was the medical workers that we spoke to, and we saw their accounts that were conveyed. They said, many of them pleaded with the Israeli soldiers to be killed. They just said, just please kill us, end this, put us out of our misery. Such was the level of torture and a mistreatment. And what was really striking was all the accounts we saw. So we spoke to some detainees, and we also saw some accounts in which they conveyed to lawyers and campaigners, but none of them knew that other Palestinians had spoken and given their account, and they all corroborated. They all revealed the same really brutal pattern. So this is an ongoing issue. We saw it's been reported extensively in the last few months, especially being beaten, being detained, being denied food, denied water, being stripped naked. Plus 972 magazine also revealed not too long ago about Palestinians being subject to electric shocks, being burnt with lighters, not being allowed access to bathrooms. Some testified having being brutally assaulted all over their body, being handcuffed, kept handcuffed and blindfolded all night. So every possible method of torture, every savage use of treatment and assault and just real inhumanity that has been inflicted on these Palestinians is it's really brutal.
And this did not only start on the 7th of October, and after that some people think that the torture of the Palestinian prisoners started after the 7th of October and what happened on the 7th of October. But we know for a fact that the Israeli army used torture against the Palestinian prisoners way before that. And even when I was in Gaza 5 or 6 years ago, I met with people who were at the Israeli prisons before, and they told me that they have been brutally assaulted and tortured in Israeli prisons for many, many, many years, even going back to 40 years ago. And this has become like beyond any doubt that Israel is torturing Palestinian prisoners. So, what does that even mean? Is the UK complicit in this? Is the UK receiving intelligence from Israel obtained through torture? And if so, what laws would the UK military be breaking?
Yeah, and it's interesting you point, because even in the West Bank now there's a record number of Palestinians being detained without charge or trial in administrative detention. So people often think this is just to do with Gaza. It's just to do with but they're just trying to retrieve the hostages. They're just trying to as a result of the atrocity of October the 7th, as they claim. Well, actually, in the West Bank there was also a record number of Palestinians being kept. Again, many of them children. All of them or most of them are innocent and without anything. It's not a crime to throw a rock to an Israeli jeep driving by, which is what a lot of them are being detained for. And I spoke to somebody again before October 7th. I did a piece elsewhere which looked at the treatment of Palestinians in the West Bank, and they said the exact same thing. They were kept in inhumane and brutal conditions, and often subjected to torture, beatings, assault, etc. So this is not a new phenomenon. But regarding the UK complicity in this, we spoke to lawyers who said it's possible, if not probable, that information and assurances Israel gives to the UK are founded on information derived from torture. So this has serious implications. There's already been an admission from the government regarding the arms export, where they admitted that there is effectively the mistreatment of detainees taking place. There are credible claims, said the government, of the mistreatment of detainees, which contributed to the effectively their very, very pathetic arms export suspension. There was part of a high court case compiled by Haq and other organisation, which basically said, look, there is torture taking place, there is mistreatment, and there has been an admission. So the UK government has its own guidelines and its own principles, and so its own red lines are being crossed, and it's not doing enough about that.
So you're saying that the UK might have received information or intelligence from the Israelis that were taken from Palestinian prisoners using torture. So what kind of information and intelligence is the UK receiving from the Israeli side on that matter?
Yeah, so the UK Ministry of Defence in December announced it would begin surveillance flights over Gaza in support of what it called the ongoing hostage rescue activity. And actually, there was a British spy flight, which was in the air when 3 Brits were killed, amongst others. If you remember the World Central Kitchen, the aid workers, when they were killed. So there was a British spy flight in the air. So if these spy planes are in the air as Israel's committing massacre after massacre, it does raise some important questions. The New York Times, actually, which was one of the only newspapers and outlets to report on this, noted, if you remember the massacre, which they called a hostage rescue mission, when the US port was used, 300 Palestinians and many more, 300 Palestinians were massacred and many more were injured. And the New York Times said, as the war has drawn on, Israeli intelligence on the hostages has improved, and they noted British and American assistance. So there is no doubt that there is a level of intelligence cooperation taking place between the UK and Israel. But if this is being used to massacre Palestinians, or is being used or derived from the torture and mistreatment of detainees, then this raises really pressing questions, because it does effectively make the UK complicit in the genocide in Gaza.
And has the UK government been exposed previously for receiving intelligence from that was obtained under torture?
Yeah, so previously there was the CIA's rendition scandal, which saw MI5 and MI6 receive foreign intelligence obtained from detainees who had been mistreated. And there is now, the government has its own rule book, which is, they call it a set of guidelines called the Principles, under which defence personnel must notify ministers if they receive intelligence from other countries that they think has originated from an abused detainee. Torture itself is a crime under both UK and international law, and it's supposed to be a complete red line for British intelligence sharing. Freedom from Torture, which is an organisation previously raised concerns when Rishi Sunak's government suspended funds for UNRWA on the basis of intelligence derived from torture. So Britain's own red lines are being crossed, and there is a clear and robust relationship here in terms of intelligence gathering and intelligence sharing. But if the UK has its own guidelines and its own principles about what what red lines exist and in relation to torture and mistreatment, then it should act accordingly and quickly if, as is indeed the case, intelligence is being shared which is being obtained via torture.
And what have you discovered about the UK military flights over Gaza? How many have taken place, and what is their intended purpose?
Yeah, so the RAF, the Royal Air Force, has flown around 200 surveillance flights over Gaza since December. That's been revealed by Declassified extensively, and they continue to claim it's for the hostage rescue operations. There was also an agreement signed, I think, in 2020, which much of the information has not been classified, but there is a consensus that entailed a significant escalation of intelligence sharing and this relationship between Britain and Israel. So there is a relationship there that does exist. It's just the extent to which is, it's not unknown, because again, others have spoken about how sturdy and robust this relationship is, and again, it raises really pressing questions about Britain's role in this.
And we know that Declassified has been exposing these flights over Gaza from the beginning of this genocide, but yet it has only been Declassified UK that exposes the RAF military flights over Gaza. Why hasn't the Western media or any British publication revealed any of these? Why haven't they took the news from Declassified and elaborated on them and talked in details about that?
Yeah, because ultimately the media, especially when it comes to Israel's crimes, Israel's genocide in Gaza, is there to misinform rather than to inform. And this is an important aspect. It's information that should be available to the public. They should know about the extent of this intelligence relationship between Israel and the UK. But the media is not here to give you the facts. The media is not here to provide you with a full picture of the reality. The media is not here to allow you to connect the dots, right? It's here to give you a diluted version of reality. And that, Israel, if they do mention anything, it's that, Britain is helping with, the hostage rescue missions and all the rest of it. They frame it in these nice flowery terms, rather than the reality, which is that the UK could be complicit in Israel's mass slaughter and the genocide in Gaza. And it was actually interesting. One former MP, Joanne Ryan, who used to be a member and the chair of Labour Friends of Israel, she actually noted in an article last week that Israel's Mossad agency is reportedly the second largest intelligence sharing partner with Britain after the CIA. So now they're admitting it themselves. And if they're, the firm supporters of Israel and kind of those who are lobbyists for Israel and still are, they're even admitting this, and yet the media still won't report on it, which tells you that what is the media's role in this? It's clearly not to inform the public on the important details about Israel's crimes and the relationship that Britain may potentially have with Israel in that regard.
Yeah, and we know that there are some British nationals who are fighting in the Israeli army in Gaza right now. So they're not British military, but they are British nationals. Do we know for sure if the British military is involved or if they are fighting in Gaza?
There have been some questions raised, and as you say, the media hasn't touched on it, or hasn't even tried to expose any of this or investigate it. But like you pointed out, we do know that there are British nationals who have gone over, some who have already been in the Israeli army pre-October 7th, who have taken part in other operations. They've openly admitted to being part of the 2014 destruction and annihilation of Gaza. Others who went from the UK. We detailed this again at Declassified. Some who have made the journey over after October the 7th to contribute to the massacre of Palestinians. Others have boasted on camera openly and shown videos in their vlogs and interviews of them, destroying buildings, etc. And that makes them complicit, in the war crimes that are being committed. They're actively contributing to the destruction of and the systematic ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in Gaza. So there is clearly a role where there is no question about the British involvement, whether it's personnel, whether it's civilians, whether it's intelligence, spy missions. There is a level of British involvement. The extent of it is yet to be unearthed, and obviously we're trying to find that out, but there is involvement. But again, the media is clearly not interested in showing this to the public.
Hamza Yusuf, thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
As Israel attempts to erase the Palestinian people under the cover of darkness, targeting journalists and censoring the press, we must rise from the ashes. At Palestine Deep Dive, we are building a multimedia space where our voices, the Palestinian voices, are always front and center. And right now, we just need 3,000 more of you to join our regular supporters and back our work so we can rapidly expand our output. Help us build the future of journalism. Become a supporter at PalestineDeepDive.com/support. This is 100% independent media powered by you.